All right. So, our lesson subtitle for today, Adran Kama Sulu. Now, you might not know Adran and you might not know Sulu, but you should know Kama. It's one of the words we saw earlier. Anybody can still remember what it is? For or because, yes. So, comma, well, we usually use it for, but it also means because. In this case, adran means time and sulu means everything or everyone or all. Now, one of the things I want to mention quickly about sulu is it's an exception on sounds. Now, as you know, almost every twinned or geminated consonant we've seen, which means duplicated consonant, is separated by what is called a micropause, like birashagam mi. You know those two M's. There's a little pause in between. You don't hear me say sulu. It's sulu, right? So there's rare exceptions. This is one. So it's sulu. There we go. And that is because of the double L. There's some that carry that, but usually double L is just pronounced as if it were one L. The only exceptions is when it has an impact on its meaning, then it will be stressed. But in this case, there's only one variation of this, so it can only be Sulu. Just saying, in case you're wondering why I'm not pronouncing specifically those two. So, Adran Kama Sulu is a time for all. And because we're going to cover the concept of time, it's a bit fitting as well. It's a double meaning when you consider all of the content that we're going to see. Now, the first thing that I want to dive into is, of course, the exercises. Now, again, I don't want to spend over half an hour on this. I just want to go through what it was. It's the reason, by the way, that I didn't ask you guys to fill in the whole lines is because in the first 5 lessons, I really want to focus on getting the patterns and structures in your heads, right? Getting at least, even if you don't know it by heart, at least you know it's not your usual structure and you know certain things should go on certain specific positions within the line. So once we've established that, I want to focus more on the content of each lesson that we just saw. Hence, some of the words and concepts are the ones that you had to fill in for these exercises. So this line, for instance, no, the colors are not beautiful. What you had to fill in here was anakad lu. So first of all, lu, anakad lu, tatin abnamul. So the structure of the line was pretty much filled in. You just had to fill in anakad and then lu for not. So lu tatin abnamul, not it is, or they are, to be exact, abnamul, beautiful. So most of this is pretty self-explanatory, really. I mean, it's what we saw about negation. Quite a bit of that is very straightforward. But there are a few things that I want to point out that I saw some people kind of trip over expectedly even on some of these. So I just want to go over those. So the next one, he will dwell in a dark brown house next to Thorin's halls. This is actually the one I want to focus on the most probably of all these lines. Now, why is it kamar dush and not dush kamar? The reason for that is, now you might remember that we had a document talking about if you have several adjectives in a row, the one that ends with ul comes first, right? And then the others. Now, neither of these end with ul. So you would think I'm pretty much free to put these wherever I want, within the structure that we have, which means after the noun. Now, that's not entirely true. The dark tells you more about brown. So what kind of brown is it? It's dark brown. So just as the adjective tells you more about the noun and the adjective follows that noun, this second adjective tells you more about, this main adjective, brown. Hence, it also needs to follow it. What if ever you have a situation where one thing tells you more about another, it almost always follows it. When you have a verb and you have an adverb that tells you more about that verb, right? He, I don't know, laughed happily. How did he laugh? Happily. That's tells you more about the way he laughed, right? So then you would add that after the verb. Your adverb follows it. So this logic of when something tells you more about something else, then it follows it, is pretty consistent in Neo-Khuzdul. So even when you have several adjectives, the main rule is if there's an ul adjective, it's called a derived adjective. It's not a primary adjective, but a derived one. In that case, you put it first, and then all the other primary adjectives like dush, gabil, all of the stuff that doesn't end with ul, right, follows that. But then even within those, there is a small order, which is if one of those tells you more about another, then whatever gives you extra information is put behind that core information, if that makes sense. So that's why it is Zahar Kamar Dush and not Zahar Dush Kamar. Okay. And in most cases, if it were, for instance, a great brown house, right? If it was Kamar, Zahar Kamar Gabil or Zahar Gabil Kamar, that's fine. You know, Gabil doesn't really tell us more about brown. It tells us more about the house, right? But in this case, this dark tells you more about the adjective. Hence, it needs to follow it. So that is one thing you keep in mind on that one. What can she ask him? A dwarf with a white beard from Bree. So can she ask him is what we're looking for to translate. So let's break up this one word, because can she ask him becomes kata ziriyahu. Now, what is all that? So the ka is can, then we have taziria. So taziria is she asks, and then hu is him. So kataziriyahu, that is can she ask him. So the ka is can, taziria is she asks, and then hu is him. So that's one of the things of this synthetical language, which Neo-Khuzdul is. It attaches a lot of things, and your pronoun will be attached to your verb, in this case, him, to she asks, and then we have this prefix of capability, this ka thing, indicating something can happen, is attached in front of it. So kataziriyahu is can she ask him, and it's a bit of a mouthful, but once you kind of see those structures, it's a bit easier to pronounce, I think. Then, yes, my friends, we should ask quickly who they are. So we should ask. Okay, so about Zud, I have made a document today. Let me just check one thing here. Yeah, I made a document today, put that online about Zud, and I also added something that we didn't see last week, but actually is related to Zud, which is the word mat. And mat indicates an absolute obligation. So I just wanted to clarify that, because there's three things. So you have Zud that you put at the end of that verb. You have Zud that you put at the front of the verb, so before it or just after it. The reason for those is one of them is expedience. The other is, so it's more like you should do it, must do it, ought to do it, and the other is basically a question: should we do it? It's a condition. So that is explained in detail in that document, and it also says, because that was a question I got today, and I think it's a very good question. Should we squeeze the adverbs or other words in between this, in this case, maziri and zud? The answer is no. Once you use words like zud or mat or ifla or those words that alter that verb meaning. It becomes a verb pair, if you will, and you can't squeeze anything between those. So even though we say, quickly, that's an adverb. We always say the adverb comes behind after your verb. That's true, but in this case, zoet will precede it because zoet and that verb become a pair. Okay. So all of these, by the way, are in a document that I'm gonna finish because there's a little section that I need to add. But it will be in your notes in your post-class folder tomorrow about the structure. So I'm going to go over what is the basic structure. What is the structure that you use when you have, when you don't have to have, when you have to be verb, when do you actually have to write it, when not. And all of these things will be listed there. I'll try to be concise as I can, but the problem is with being too concise, then some of the things are skipped. So I'd like to make it one document that has all of it without overwhelming you. So I hope I get to that objective tomorrow. Right, moving on. Yes, you will only listen to her. Okay, this is another one of those synthetic, things that we jammed together. So you will listen to her. Let's start with that. Let's forget about the only for a minute. Only, by the way, is the word izul at the end. Okay, so you will listen to her. So you listen is sahbari. So sahbari is the male, you singular to be exact. And then we add dia, meaning to her. The za in front indicates will. So yes, you will only listen to her. Sahbaridia izul. Or za sahbaria izul, to be exact. Right, my uncle has 2 beautiful old black tables. Now here you had to fill in 2 beautiful and old. Now the black and he has was already written, but in case the adjective black wasn't written, then you could indeed have switched it around. You could have said nu abnamul gamil narak or narak gamil, because both of those are separate adjectives that are not, one does not influence the other. They're both not ul adjectives. So that could have been switched around, but in this case, it was already filled in. Okay, so Rabban nu abnamul gamil naragduhu. Next one. Please, why don't you listen to the happy hobbits? So kufne sahbari. So why don't you? Don't is ne. If you have never, then that would be ne kikun. Though you could even say never just by using ne, if it's evident by your line. So why don't you listen is kufne sahbari dumalkan gidul in this case. Then, yes, you, and the you in this case is a female, singular, must ask him which of these 9 candles are silver colored. So yes, you must ask him. So we're with must again. In this case, again, I refer to the document that specifically talks about where zoet should be placed. Here you had another joining of a verb with pronoun saziria, and then saziria is of course you ask the female singular, and then who is added because it's you ask him. So saziriahu zoet in this case, you must ask him. Right. I want a beautiful, deep, dark hall. I don't want an unhappy, light hobbit hole. Yeah, that's a very dwarvish thing to say, I think. I want a beautiful, deep, dark hall. I don't want an unhappy, light hobbit hole. So what we're looking for, the words that you had to fill in was, first of all, buzera dush. Now, again, here, if you didn't know it was Buzra and Dush, which one would need to go first. Now, in this case, it was already indicated. But dark and deep, I mean, they're separate from each other. It's not, one does not influence the other or tell you more about the other, really. So you could have switched these. Now, in this case, you couldn't because it was already filled in and you only had that one thing to fill in. But if that was not the case, then you could have switched these. You could have said Dush Buzra. That would have been fine. I don't want is really what we're looking for here. Ne Azrali. I want is Azrali. Ne is I don't or don't. Right? Ne Azrali. Next one. You should not ask what the unwise dwarves want. So wise is Bahir. Unwise makes it Bin Bahir. And then what they want is Tazralin. And they, I mean, in fact, I should not have indicated dwarves that they were male, because if we use dwarves in general, you will always use the male form because we're assuming that it's a mixed group, right? So that's the logic behind it there. Let's have a listen first. Haburma, folks. Let's have a listen.
Idmi, zu, inki, kun sulu inki yadi. Sulu Iberie utak.
Irashegam mi. Azrali.
Ne izrisaka ugromi. Iberi zorn. Haiku lumirgin. Hati zutak yadi. Ratam aglibi Iberi. Dam aglibi imzir injiri. Zu illiki tada inapvelak rat injiri.
Kunzratak.
Right, so I'm guessing you might be able to tell where we are. We're in the mine. That's where we are. Let's listen to it again, and this time I will go through what exactly is being said here.
Idmi, zu, inki, kun sulu inki yadi. Sulu Iberie utak.
Irashegam mi. Azrali.
Ne izrisaka ugromi. Iberi zorn. Haiku lumirgin. Hati zutak yadi. Ratam aglibi Iberi. Dam aglibi imzir injiri. Zu illiki tada inapvelak rat injiri.
Kunzratak.
All right. Well, I don't know about you guys, but it doesn't sound like the nicest foreman to have. So let's listen to it one more time with the text up. Might be easier to just go through it easily. Let's just listen to it one more time.
Idmi, zu, inki, kun sulu inki yadi. Sulu Iberie utak.
Irashegam mi. Azrali.
Ne izrisaka ugromi. Iberi zorn. Haiku lumirgin. Hati zutak yadi. Ratam aglibi Iberi. Dam aglibi imzir injiri. Zu illiki tada inapvelak rat injiri.
Kunzratak.
Right. And while they continue to work further in the mine, the focus basically of at least this section of our lesson is the imperative. So what we're seeing here is words like inki, ihbiri, of imziri. So it's in instructions that are being given, commands, if you will, that are being given. So it's a different form than the form that we've seen so far for verbs, which was the imperfect. So now with the imperative, we're giving commands, specific commands, instructions to people. And there's two forms for these. We'll see them in a minute. So let's just go through this in a bit more detail. So the imperative that we're seeing, when do we use it? First of all, We're using it to express commands and orders, to express prohibition. So with ne, so don't do this. If it's a clear command or order, to not do something. To give disputable advice. So to whom are we saying this? Well, here you only have two forms to worry about. There's a singular and there is a plural. So let me just show you the singular here. So the form that you know here, let's use the verb to come. Tanaki, he comes or it comes. Inki is come. So what you see here is that the structure, well, let me just give you another. This is an example with an a verb imperfect. So the result is inki. Taziri is an I form. If you can remember, there's two forms in the imperfect, an a form and an I form that we saw in the last lesson. So he asks or it asks. The result there is izri. So apart from the fact that the imperfect has two forms, an A and an I form, this again doesn't matter. What I'm trying to show you here is that the structure that we are seeing is basically the same. So when these verbs, tanaki and taziri, are what is called two radical verbs. With two radical verbs, it means they're made up of specifically, in this case, N and KH, which is one radical, and then Z and R. So these are two radical verbs. So in two radical verbs, if you make the imperative, come, ask, eat, sit, whatever it may be, you will have an I at the front and an I at the back, and then those two radicals sit there nicely. Now, might be a little bit confusing that inki, you might think, hey, aren't those three letters? Well, the KH counts as one. Okay, so inki, izri, those are two radical imperatives. Now, if we look at three radicals, example, an A verb, tahbari, he listens, then that becomes ihbir. So that's the command, listen. Then we have tamziri, he works, comes imzir, work. Now, note, this is the singular imperative we're talking about, right? So we're talking to one person. We're saying come, ask, listen, work to one guy or one woman, whatever it may be. Tahliti, he takes. Ihlit, take. So what we're seeing here is, doesn't matter if it's an I form or an A form in the imperfect, you take those three consonants, you put an I in front, and then the last I goes before the last radical. That is how you make the singular imperative. So inki, izri, ihbir, imzir, ihlit. They are commands, they are orders, they could express prohibition even. These are the forms you use for the singular. Now, in this case, in our example, in our audio fragment, we had the foreman address one of them, and then he would use these forms. And then we also had him address all of the minors. And then he used a slightly different form. So let's look at that now. So the plural, so giving you an example here, what you see is before we had inki, just a regular I at the end. Now when we're addressing more than one person, that I gets stretched. It's a longer vowel, becomes inki. So come you all, if you will. Taziri, as you can expect, comes izri. So the second plural just stretches that final I at the end. And again, it doesn't matter if there's an A form or an I form imperfect. When you have an imperative, this is the form used for the plural. Now, for the three radical verbs, what happens there is you add an extended I. So we had ihbir for singular, and now it becomes ihbiri, listen you all. So imziri, which is all of you work. That is basically what is being said. It's a command for several people to start working, or it's a command for several people to start listening or asking or come, the moment you have more than one person, this is the form that you're going to use. That's the simplicity of the imperative. The other forms have a myriad of forms. Well, we haven't even seen half of them, right? It's a singular, it's a plural, and the only thing you need to take into account is, does it have 2 radicals or 3? And otherwise, you know exactly how to write it. That's it. So what we saw with the 2 radicals, as we see below here on the slide, is that it extends that I. Here it adds basically that I at the end. Because in the singular, we saw it was ihbir or imzir or ihlit. And now it becomes ihbiri, imziri, ihliti. Right? So you add that extended I. So whatever, if it's a 2 or 3 radical verb, if it's an imperative and you talk to more than one person, that final sound will be an extended I. Always, guaranteed. It does not matter what verb it is. That's what it's going to be. So this is the imperative used again for commands, orders, even for commanding negation. Okay, so we're going to try a couple of things. So I have put the verbs that we at this point know and have seen. And I've also, for your convenience, have put the singular and plural imperative forms up. So you don't need to know them by heart at this point because we've just seen them. So we have come, inki, inki, ask, izri, izri, listen, ihbir, ihbiri, and so forth. For work, take, speak, and dwell. Those are the forms that we have seen so far. So if we want to say, listen, children, come here. By the way, in the little board below in that orange little square, I've added the words as well that we're going to be looking for. So just in the case you can't recall what exactly children is or here is, if you look at that board, you should be able to find them. So making it a bit easier, hopefully. So anybody want to give a swing at this one? Listen, children, come here. Yeah, perfect. So nicely done. So what you've done is, so listen. Okay, we're talking to children. So that's more than one, right? So because it's more than one, we're looking at the plural. So listen, plural is ihbiri, right? So ihbiri nadan. So nadan is children. Then again, we're still talking to the children. So it's still more than one. So it's not inki, but inki. So inki, and then the word for here is yadi, which is listed over there. Right. Very, very nicely done. Next one. Work long and fast, men. Work long and fast, men. So we're looking for imziri, which is pretty well done, by the way. Imziri indeed is work. We're talking to several people. We're talking to men, not just one man. So imziri sigin ramulum atan. So long and fast men. Right, the next one. Don't ask me, elf. Don't ask me, elf. Anybody want to give this one a go? Don't ask me, elf. Ne izriye fund. So ne izriye. So don't is ne, then ask is indeed izri because we're talking to one person. But it's ask me, and this is one of the things that I want to mention as well. So this is not specific to like the imperfect where you can add pronouns and other things. It is it's valid for every kind of verb type. So in the imperative, you will see the same thing. Izri is the imperative for ask, and then izriye is, you add that interfix y in addition to a, which is me. So don't ask me, izriye, and then elf is fund. The plural of that is fanad, which I even put the English there because I don't think we had seen fund yet. And that's why I put it there in that little orange square. Right, next one. Take the pickaxe, man. here, take them all. We'll do this one together. So take, in this case, we're looking at Ichlit because we're talking to one guy, right? Take the pickaxe, man. By the way, I think there might be an extra comma needed there. Anyway, Inap Felak is pickaxe. So Felak is literally is chisel, right? Inap Felak is the pickaxe. Uten is man. So Atan, plural, Uten, man. Yadi, Ichlit hun, Sulu. So Ichlit, take, right? We're still talking to one guy, so it's Ichlit, not Ichliti. Even though we're saying take them, so hun, we add that to it, and then finish the line with Sulu. Right. Anybody want to try the next one? Speak, elves. Yep, that is it indeed. Iglibi fanad. So Iglibi, why Iglibi? Because we're talking to more than one person. Elves, plural. So it's Iglibi, not Iglib. And then fanad is the plural for elf. It's elves. All right, then one more. Don't dwell in a cave. Dwell in my hall. Let's start with the first thing. Don't dwell in a cave. Anybody try that one? Don't dwell in a cave. So ne itmin or ne itmini nigairu. Why? Because how can you tell? You don't know from the line. So that's the thing. Sometimes you might not get enough information in the English to be sure if we're talking to one person or more than one person. So don't dwell in a cave, dwell in my hall. If, for instance, this is part of a story where, I don't know, Jack is, speaking to Bob, bit of strange names for dwarves, but anyway, then he's talking to one guy, right? And then it's going to be Itmin and not Itmini. But if Jack is talking to Bob and Roger and Peter, then it's going to be Itmini. Really the strangest assortment of words. So ne Itmini nigairu, Itmini ni dume. So it could be ne Itmin nigairu, Itmin ni dume, depending on who we're talking to. Well, that kind of sums it up for the imperative. To be honest, I think the imperative, in my personal opinion, is probably one of the easiest ones that you could have. I mean, when you use it, it's pretty straightforward. It's a command. It's an order. There's no messing around. You're bossing somebody around. This is the form that you use. Simple as that. The way it's written, pretty much fairly simple as well. There's kind of 4 different forms that you have. 2, singular and plural, and then 1 for if it has 2 radicals or 3. And that's it. There's nothing more to it than that. No, you would not. It's really a command or order. When what you're talking about would actually use a form that we haven't seen before, which is the Jusif form. And the Jusif is for, I wouldn't say polite commands, because that's not true either. It's more of polite requests, right? Requests in general, but we haven't seen that form before, and we will not in this beginner course, right? No, it's really commands and orders. It's you're asking people to specifically do something, or explicitly don't do something. So if you're like sit down or come in or listen to me, those are commands. And that's what you would use it for. But if you're like politely inviting somebody to possibly do something, no, that's a different form altogether. You've spotted the exception. Yeah, it's a weird one, because I didn't want to cover it, but I always wonder if somebody notices it. So idmi, the thing is, welcome, right? So literally, you actually give a command to the people that you are welcoming to welcome everybody, which is kind of weird, because for us, welcome just means hey, you there, you're welcome. You're welcome here. But if you look at it, idmi uses, it's a 2 radical form. It's, either IDMI or IDMI, extended I, that's an imperative. So literally, when you're saying idmi, you're actually commanding people to welcome everybody. So I know it's weird. That's not how welcoming works in English, but it's definitely how it works with dwarves, because that's one of the original imperatives actually that David Salo included in his lines. I always thought it was a bit weird, but I've embraced it over the years. But yes, it's a weird one, but it is still an imperative, and in a way, I guess it's one of those fossilized lines, which dwarves wouldn't think about anymore after a while, because you're just used to kind of using it as welcome, and that's it. Nor do they probably think of it as a command at this stage, But I'm just saying that's it is an imperative. So it's a weird one. It's the only kind of weird one I can think of that isn't really a command, but still uses the imperative. Well spotted. Right. The next piece is what we're going to see here is the weather. So let me show you a couple of things here, folks. Here we go. So we're going to listen to an audio file in a little bit, but I just want to go through a couple of things here. So we have Ibris, which, by the way, uses the radicals BRZ, which is also the radicals that we use for red, right? Baraz. Ibris, the sun. Ibrizul, sunny. We have Shatur. Shatur is clouds. Like Bundu Shatur, which is one of the mountains of Moria. Bundu Shatur, cloudy head. Right? Cloud, head of clouds. Head in the clouds. Right? Head of clouds. Bundu Shatur. Then cloudy is Shatarul. Rainy is Razakul. Then rain is Razuk. Then bir. Now we know this word means correct, clear, right. It also means clear weather. Bir, right? It's one of those multifunctional Swiss Army knives words that you use for a lot of things. But, well, like in English, really. I mean, clear weather. You also say clear weather in English. Snowy. Now, snowy is a bit of a funny one in a way, as is the word for snow. Labam razuk. So razuk is rain. Labam, can anybody remember what labam is? White. So white rain. That's pretty much what it is. White rain. So, again, for people from languages that have like 20 words for snow, yeah, that wouldn't cover it. I get it, but they're dwarves. They're inside a mountain most of the time. I don't think they're going to have a lot of words for snow. So Labam Razkul is snowy. Then wind is Bagd, and then windy is Bagadul. And then you have Ablak Bagd, storm, and Ablak Bagdul. Now, if wind is Bagd and Ablak Bagd, yeah, you kind of already see the link there. Ablak means power, strength, Ablak. So Ablak Bagdul literally is powerful winds. That's, that's a storm, right? That's what we're talking about. So stormy and storm. So again, Ibrizul, Shatarul, Razakul, Bir, Labam Raskul, Bagadul, Ablak Bagdul. And then the nouns Ibriz, Shatur, Razuk, Labam Razuk, Bagd, Ablak Bagd. That's what we're talking about. Right. Let's put these up. And put this one up. And
Badum Notgalik Kazad Idmi du Badum Bakati Badmu ala Nort Tati Torinoldum Bagadul Bidkin Shatarul Bozra Burmu Bizar Bir Ord Razakul Zirnhanad Labam Razkul Labam Zarsudno Ablak Bagdul Ra Nargun Ibrizul Haga Lansgaliksulu.
Okay, so pretty sure you're kind of getting what we're having the weather report here. So let's have a listen to it again, and then this time going over the content. So I've put up the lines, and let's listen to it again.
Badum. Nordgalik kazad. Idmi du badum bakati. Badmu ala nord tati. Torinoldum bagadul. Bidkin shatarul. Bozra burmu bizar bir. Ord razakul. Zirn hanad labam razkul. Labam zarsudnu ablak bagdul. Ra nargun ibrizul. Ibrizul haga. Lansgaliksulu.
Right. Well, thank you, Miss. Okay, so the weather report, folks. Let's have a look and see what the weather is like. So let's start with that first line. Nurt Galik Kazad. I think that should be a fairly easy one. Nurt Galik Kazad. Yep, just a simple hello, basically. That's what she's saying. Nurt Galik Kazad. Then idmi, which is that kind of famous imperative. Welcome to the weather report. Badum bakati. So badum is the weather. So as mentioned there, the title of the section, Badum the weather. So welcome to the weather report, Badum bakati. So bakati is a report. So badmu ala nurt tati. What do you think that means? Badmu ala nurt tati. Yes, so weather is badum, then we have to add u for weather of, alanurt today, and then tati is, it is, right? So the weather of today is. So let's have a look at the weather of today. So we have Torinoldum, Bagadul, Bitkin Shatarul, Buzra Burmubizar Bir, Urd Razakul, Zirin Hanad Labam Razkul, Labam Zarsudnu, which is a new one, we haven't seen that one before. Labam Zarsudnu, Ablak Bagdul, Nargun Ibrizul Haga. Right, so let's go over these. So tell me about Thorin's Halls. Let's start with that. Thorinwuldum, what's happening over there? That's the one at the top left corner, by the way. Yep, Bagadul Windy. Bitkin, what is Bitkin again? What are we talking about for Bitkin? It was indeed, yes, Bitkin, place of crossing. That's what it means, Bitkin. So the crossing place, talking about the Greenway and the Great East-West Road. Those are the two roads that cross there in Brie. So Bitkin Shatarul, what is Bitkin Shatarul? Cloudy, yeah. So Shatur, as in Bundu Shatur, the mountain of Moria. Shatur means clouds. So Shatarul is cloudy. Then Buzra Burmubizar Bir. What is the place we're talking about and what's going on with the weather? Yeah, must be some elvish magic. There's stuff happening all over the place except in Rivendell. Right, Urd Razakul. Where are we and what's happening with the weather? Yeah, so the Lonely Mountain, Urd, Razakul, Razuk is rain, Razakul is rainy. Right, so Zirin Hanad, Labam Raskul, you can see it in the top right corner, that is Zirin Hanad. So what are we talking about and what's happening over there, folks? Who can tell me? Yeah, there's a snowy in the Iron Hills. So notice as well that she introduced Badmu Alanurt Tati. So the weather of today is, and then there's no repeating, like we're not saying Zirin Hanat Tatin or Tati Labam Raskul. It's just, the weather in the Iron Hills is this. So we don't need to repeat Tati and all of these. Now, the next one I want to translate for you a little bit. Well, I think you can already translate one section of it. Labam Zars Zudnu. Right, let's start with labam. That's the section you should know. Labam. Yes, so labam is white. So zars is the word for tree. Zudnu is the word for realm. So realm of the white tree. So Gondor actually in Elvish just literally means stone land. So land of stone. Gond, stone. Gondor. Here they go for, well, in my opinion, a more poetical meaning. Labam Zarsudnu is the realm of the white tree. And weather-wise, they're not doing brilliantly over there. What kind of weather, Ablak Bagdul, are we talking about? Yeah, it's stormy. It's stormy. So Ablak Bagdul. Bagdul is, or Bagadul, by the way, is windy, and Ablak Bagdul, so that kind of loses an A there, is stormy. Then Nargun Ibrizul Haga. Nargun is actually an original Tolkien word for this place. So it's the only one that we haven't seen yet. Nargun is literally, it means black one. You might recall the word for black is narag. So black one is, or he or it that is black one is Nargun, right? So that is the name dwarves use for Mordor, according to Tolkien. So the black one, just generally. Nargun Ibrizul Haga even. What does that mean? Ibrizul Haga. Yeah, so it's sunny, very sunny. So yeah, well, it's a scorcher there. So yeah, I would agree. Okay, and then she closes off her weather report with Lananskalik Sulu, which I guess everybody should know. So Lans is evening, Zannen or Lomil even would be night. But we haven't seen Lomil, so forget about that. I have put these names and all that, like Labamzar Sudnu, that's all in the notes, by the way, for this lesson. So you don't need to frantically write it down. You could, but there's no need. It's in the notes. Right. Okay. So if we've seen the day's report, then we might also have a look at another weather report. Let's have a listen to this one.
Badem bakati yuhadet noort. Apkan noort satati aran no di noort raas aranan hadet di zaman. Bitatr noort bat ibris noort satati shataru hamamul razatati az aran dimon. Bi aklat noort la tanar noort yotu shatarul ya alabam razuk ya adad noort. Ya az aram gamek nizamen la az aran do.
Right. Now let's put up a bit more information for all you so that you can go through, plus the text. So what we're seeing here is the Hadet Nurt, or specifically the Badem Bakatiu Hadet Nurt. Now, if we know that Badem is weather, we know that Bakati is reports. We know Nurt, we know Hadet. Hadet Nurt actually, I think, is also a word that we've already seen. So Badem Bakati Hadet Nurt would be, yeah, bingo. The Badem Bakati is, so Badem weather Bakati report of, because we have to add that interfix, this Y, because you cannot say Bakati U, so you have to say Bakati U. So Badem Bakati U is weather report of the week, basically. Hadet Nurt, 7th day is the week. So Badem Bakati Hadet Nurt is the weekly weather report, or the weather report of the week, literally. Okay, so a couple of words that I want to kind of show you guys that we're going through. I'll let you listen to it again. So a couple of words that will pop up here is, first of all, the word aran, which is degrees, az, minus, hamamul, a little, yotur, more, la. So again, it's like lu, with the little glottal stop at the end. You lift it up, you kind of push the air through, la, until or till. And then there's Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, but these are different. Why did I take the trouble to name these? Because Saturday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and all that are named for, Norse gods in most cases, like Thor's Day, the day of Thor, Woodness Day, these are, or Frida's Day. These are, Norse gods where we get that from. And obviously, there are no Norse gods in Middle Earth, so we have to find new names for these. Apkan Nurt, literally Apkan means awakening. So the dwarves recall their awakening by the touch of Mahal. It's the start of their week on Friday. Then Tatar means star. So Saturday is Star Day. Ibris we've already seen. That's actually one of them that actually works, because Sunday, the day of the sun, Ibris Nurt also means Sunday. If it's not broken, don't change it. Isgil Nurt. Isgil is the name for the moon. Isgil. And again, Monday comes from Moon Day. So again, why fix something if it's not broken? Aklat Nurt. Aklat is sky. You might remember that from Kalat, which means sky blue. Aklat, sky, Kalat, sky blue. So Aklat Nurt, sky day, 5th day of the week. Then you have Adat Nurt. So with dwarves, every week it's Father's Day. Why they have no Mother's Day, I must have had a logic when I wrote this down, but sadly it escapes me. Tanub is the Day of Thunder, which kind of links it a little bit to Norse religion with Thursday, Thor's Day. It was the god of thunder as well. So, but anyway, that is kind of a little bit of a wink there still. But anyway, those are the days that are listed. Then we also have words like ars, which we actually have seen, I believe, in the word for tea. Ars is hot. And then there's Kalil. Now, sometimes Kalil is written without the I. So Kalil is actually Ereborian. Kalul with no last vowel is the general this description. This is one of those adjectives that has two forms. Kalil and Kalul, both are fine. I generally write Kalil because that's more clear. I think that's more, it puts it, it makes it a bit more separate from the noun iklal, which is cold, right? So the cold, as opposed to a cold day, the adjective cold. Right, let's listen to the weather report again, and then we can have a bit of questions and go through these. So let's listen to it again.
Badem bakati yuhadet nort. Apkan nort satati aran no di nort raas aranan hadet di zaman. Bitatr nort bat ibris nort satati shataru hamamul razatati az aran dimon. Bi aklat nort latanar nort yotu shatarul ya alabam razuk ya adad nort. Ya az aram gamek nizamen la az aran lu.
Right. So, Apkan nurt zatati aranu, ni nurt raas aran hadet nizanen. Let's go over it briefly here. So, Apkan nurt is Friday. Zatati. What is zatati again? Yeah. So, will be, it will, right? So, Apkan nurt. So, Friday will be Aran nu. So Aran, is degrees. Nu is 2. So it's going to be 2 degrees. So that's what we see as well there on our little chart. We see the abbreviation AB, which is Apkan Nurt, which is the Friday. And then we see, okay, that's 2 degrees. Ra'az Aran hadet ni zanun. So Ra is and, Az is minus. So minus degrees 7. Now, okay. You might say, hey, why do we put this minus in front of the degrees Well, there's an explanation for that specifically. Well, first of all, it's not an adjective. So it doesn't need to go after aran, after degrees. And it pretty much takes the same spot as you would in English. So minus, 7 degrees. The only difference with English is that you put the number before degrees. That's the only difference. But I did explain, because it goes a bit further in detail why that is. I have a separate document in the post-class folder that explains why these sorts of words like minus and even some of them like yotur and all of that are a bit different than others, and why that is. Luckily, they follow English order almost perfectly, so that makes it a bit easier. But I just wanted to explain that in case there were questions on that. So az aran hadet, so minus 7 degrees, nizanun. So what is nizanun? In the night, yeah. So zanun is night, and then in the night, nizanun. So what we have here is on Friday, it will be 2 degrees in the day, ninurt, and minus 7 at night. That's pretty chilly. Right. Bi taternurt li la ibrisnurt. So la, as we see here in the right column, means until. So from Saturday till Sunday, it will be shatarul, rainy, but it will be a little rainy, shatarul hamamul. Again, this is the something tells you more about something else, right? So then whatever it is that tells you more about it needs to go behind that word. So shatarul hamamul, a little bit rainy. And it will be minus 8 degrees. Az aran gimon. So az is minus. Comes from the word to reduce, by the way, az. So az aran gimon. Next one, bi aklat nurt la tanab nurt. So can anybody remember what the word bi, by the way, is? Because I kind of went over that fairly quickly in the last line. From, yes. So from then aklat nurt Tuesday to tanab nurt Thursday, more rain. So yotur shatarul, ya with. Now you can remember that the word for with normally is zai. However, if you link two things together, like coffee with milk, right, you use ya for with. This is in one of the documents that we described all of these words like tu, zai, ya, and all of that was listed there. So if we're like listing something, then you don't use zai. So here, shatarul ya labam razuk. So cloudy with a bit of snow, right? It's labam razuk. Aya adat nurt. So upon aya, upon, on adat nurt, Wednesday. So, or Father's Day if you want to be literal. So, but not the yearly Father's Day some people celebrate. That's not it. So aya adat nurt. Then the last line, ya az aran gamek nizanen la az aran nu. There's a lot of glottal stops in this one. There's a lot of very short words, which often make it challenging for people to understand what we're seeing here. But ya az aran gamek is with minus 5 degrees nizanen at night, right? Or in the night, literally. Until az aran nu, so minus 2 degrees. So within that range, basically, they're saying here. So that's the weekly report. I wanted not to kind of stress you guys too much with a lot of the translations here. Quite a few new words in the overall weather segment. Then let us press through to the next piece here. Now I want to go over this fairly quickly because, well, it takes a bit of time. But not to rush things, but I put a lot of information on this in the notes. So just saying. So what we're talking about is the seasons of the year, We're talking about time in this lesson in general. So seasons of the year. So we have, normally you'd think, okay, well, there's 4 seasons and that pretty does it. Sadly, yeah, it's a bit more than that, because in the under the mountain, the effects of seasons are often, well, depending on location and the hall and its geothermal activity, they're more noticeable during rising water levels than due to temperature. So once you go 25 meters below, your temperature is going to be 12 degrees centigrade almost the entire year. It doesn't really matter if it's winter or anything. So what matters then is how much water does the soil get, and that will, decide your seasons. So from a dwarven perspective, if you're in your mountain 90% of the time, you're not really affected as much by the outside world. You're affected by the inside world. Hence, your seasons are inside differently than they would be outside. Again, once you go 25 meters below, temperature's 12 degrees, almost all over the place in the earth, whether it's, unless there's geothermal activity. But, it doesn't matter if you're in a desert or, up north or whatever, it's going to be pretty consistent. It's 12 degrees. So what you're looking for really is noticeable differences below ground that shape your seasons. Now, am I saying the dwarves did not know about spring and summer and all that? Of course they did. They were outside as well. I mean, but for their main calendar, if you will, on seasons, you'd have 6 different things happening below ground, which you might not think of, from our quote unquote human perspective, but as dwarves, it would be a completely different calendar. And that's what I want to briefly touch upon here. Again, this is more of a cultural seasoning of this lesson. That's all it is. It's not grammar this time. It's not, a whole bunch of vocabulary, but I want to touch upon that. So let's go over these distinct 6 seasons that we have. So we have the Injam Adran, which is the leaf time. So Injam is leaf, and then Adran is time. A noticeable decline in available surface-derived food, I would think, brought in to the mountain, which is, as you see, it's kind of September, October-ish. Now, again, why is this ish? Because their calendar resets on Durin's Day, so which is the marker there on that little star there. I've put it like beginning of October, but it could be halfway October. It could even be almost November. It was 25th of October or 23rd, I think, this year. So yeah, that's their New Year, if you will. So yeah, trade would slow, caravans become rarer, stocks of the winter vegetables start to turn low, one would imagine. Then you have the Iklal Adran. So we've seen that Kalil is the word for cold. So Iklal is the cold. So the cold time, Iklal Adran, which is basically a wintry season, if you will. It's, November, December, January. So this is actually the best mining period for dwarves, or would be the best mining period, because the surface is frozen and the meltwater inflow is, well, either non-existent or at its lowest. So because you got little meltwater coming in, the dwarves would be able to mine deeper and keep most of their shafts fully operational. And also the season preceding would be, their Forge Day Fest in many northern halls, one would imagine, because you get a lot of new ore coming up in that season. So while for men or farmers or whatever that, work the land, this would probably be one of the more quiet periods. Under the earth, it's a completely different story, because there's no fresh water coming in, or at least no flood waters coming in this period, because it freezes up top, which makes it ideal time for them to do what they need to do in mining. Hence, right after that period, when the thawing kind of starts, or almost starts, is where, that mining slows down, and then they would have forging feasts, because you have such wealth of ore coming in. So in the Shuluk Adran, so you might remember Shuluk, the wet time, related to the word water there. Water levels they start to get their yearly peak due to snow melting, spring rains from above that starts. Now, I want to mention here, it says here on this calendar, January, February, March. You might think, well, that's a bit early for kind of snow melting. Again, this all depends obviously on the exact location. So their seasons is not like fixed from one to another. This is also what I want to point out there. Let me just open these here. There's a little icon that it could be like this, that little square there. You could also have a hall in the north that looks pretty much like this, where you have an Iklalatran, where they can do a lot of mining, in that period, because there's a long freezing period that happens. Then you have the Kelit Adran. Kelit actually means young life. So this is your start of spring, if you will, right? So as the waters, they recede again, many of the deeper mines can reopen, and the season sees the highest yields of like underground fungi and surge of cave fauna like bats and beetles and cave moths and all of that. So yeah, that's also something that you need to take into account, that by the third age, dwarves didn't grow their food, or most of it. Tolkien says they didn't bother growing their food like in Erebor, because they had trading partners like Dale and all of that. But remember that there were very different times back in the days, like in the second age, where they closed off Khazad-dûm for like 1,000 years, right? Then obviously you need to have your food produced under your mountain as well, and you have natural fauna and flora and fungi and all of that under the mountain. So it would have been perfectly possible to feed even a large group of dwarves with what's under the mountain, and that would have been the perfect time for it. The next time there is the Ars Adran. Now, we've seen Ars means hot, very simple, hot time. Although the underground temperatures, and this one thing that people often think like, oh yes, it's hot out there. It's it will have an impact underground. The underground temperatures, they remain stable. As I said, once you hit 25 meters below, it's about 12 degrees all over the place. The season brings the poorest air circulation in the deep tunnels. That's the problem with that season. What you would have is a problem with air circulation to do your mining. So it becomes warm, damp, even, with your stable temperature underground. You only really get hotter temperatures once you really go down 500, 700, 800,000 meters. Then you will have incredible temperatures, but that's because you have a lava flow. You have a magma flow, to be exact, that will increase your temperatures. So warm, damp surface air will settle at the entrance, then reduces the chimney effect you would need for mining. So anything really down below you wouldn't be able to do what you need to do there. Then you have the Dablan Adran. Double is mild, so it's also a word used for like mild food and all that. Double Adran is mild time, so the temperatures they remain stable, but it's the driest period, so the water surfaces retreat, reducing seepage into the mine. So it's also an ideal time to do some extra mining where possible. The lower water levels allow for maintenance on the water wheels, the pumps, drainage systems, and all that. They would have had them. You don't require electricity to get a water pump or a water wheel and all of that. The hobbits might not have had more than a forged bellows. That doesn't mean the dwarves were on that level, where it definitely was not. Right. I need to still go through one more section because we're talking about time. We obviously need to talk about the time itself. Now here, by the way, what you're seeing here is just winter, summer, spring, and all that. You could say, in some parts, Shuluk Adran would be counted as your spring as well. In some parts, Double Adran might actually be your autumn. Again, it's not rigid. It's not fixed. It's a lot more flexible. And then I've noticed the times where there would be a lot of underground activity, as I've mentioned, and especially in the wintertime. Right. Now, important stuff that I want to go through. When we're talking about time, the daytime hours, so normally we divide our clock in 24 hours. We're in 12 hours to be exact, but we have a 24-hour day. Now, the dwarves also would have a 12-hour daytime and a 12-hour nighttime. However, the split of those hours is determined by sunrise and sunset. Now, this is not something that I pulled out of my hat. This is actually linked to the old Hebrew custom, because also Durin's Day is kind of linked to that as well. Like resetting your clock, your year calendar, if you will, is kind of the same that you would have with a lunisolar calendar that you also have with the ancient Hebrews. So Gals is actually the daytime part of your Nurt. Now we say Nurt is that 24-hour sections where you have Gals, Zannen, the evening, or the night rather. But Nurt is in fact the whole 24-hour thing. That is the day, as in a day, which includes your nighttime as well. So the thing is with this, we start our first hour at sunset, or at sunrise rather, and our 12th hour at sunrise. What that means is that in summers, your hours will last longer, and in winters, they will be shorter. So you will have shorter hours in the winter than you will have in summer. And that's, again, and you might think, hey, wait a minute, dwarves are inside the mountain. How the hell would they know when it's sunrise and sunset? Well, actually, there's mirrors in their mountains that guide the sunlight so that they could even grow crops and whatever within that mountain. So, yeah, they would know perfectly well when there is, when it is sunrise and sunset. And that is attested in Lord of the Rings when they enter the 21st hall and they see light coming in there as well. So just saying Nurt, although colloquially it's used for the day, right? The daylight hours. Actually, that is Gals. Gals is your day, your actual sun, the time that the sun is up. Let me put it that way. Now, what I want to go through briefly is how to tell the time. So literally, if you say 5 past 10, you in Khuzdul would say 10th and 5. So 10th, the ordinal number, not the cardinal number. So not 10, but 10th. Not 4, but 4th, 2nd, and so forth. So 10th and 5, 4th hour, 2nd less a quarter, so quarter to 2. So you start with the hour, then what it is or what you add, or so Adram is hour, Ragamek and 5, Hapkulul Rumku is quarter. Now this Rumku is actually related to the word for 4, Ramek. So Ramek Rumku, a quarter, which is a fourth of a whole. So hence Rumku quarter, Ramek 4. So it's one way of remembering what a quarter is. Rumku, a 1/4 of a whole, if you will. So Sasek 10th, Ragamek 10th and 5, Ramek Adram 4th hour. Now, I want to point this out. This is kind of weird because I have been hammering the fact that you say first the noun, then the adjective, and a number counts as an adjective, right? So you'd think, hey, Roy, in that case, it should be Adram Ramek. True, but not if you're telling the time, because then you have to state the hour first and then what it is. So this is an exception to that. 4th hour Ramek Adram. If you're saying Adram Ramek, you're basically saying hour 4th. You're not stating the time specifically. You're just talking about hours and then the 4th hour. For instance, we were on the night shift. And in the 4th hour, this happened, right? Then you're not specifically saying it's 4 o'clock. So there's a difference between those. So just to indicate time, you start with the number first and then hour, in this case, Adram. So that's the structure used. So while in English you have 5 past 10, literally in Khuzdul it's 10th and 5. In English you're 4 o'clock. In Khuzdul it's 4th hour. English quarter to 2. then it's second less a quarter. So you deduct a quarter, if you will, less a quarter. So going through these, and I'm going to give you a couple of examples, and I'm putting up the structure again, and then a couple of verbs and whatnot. We will work at 2:30. So, Zamamziri zai nu ra'amlak. Now, I'm focusing not on the verb and all of that. I'm focusing on 2:30. Nu. So again, it's not nu, because nu is just 2. It's nu, which is a little bit more difficult because you have to stretch the vowel and put a glottal stop at the end. So nu, which is second, ra'amlak, so second and a half, which basically means 2:30, right? 2:30. Then if you come at 3 o'clock, then listen. So ni sanaki zai gem adram ni ihbir. And that ihbir is the tense that we saw earlier, the imperative. So gem adram, so 3 o'clock, so 3 hours, if you will. And again, note the fact that you do not have adram first, but you have gem first. So because you're stating time, you have to indicate the hour first. Ask him if it is 5:15. Izrihu ni tati gamek ra rumku. So again, the time, then adds a quarter, and it is 5:15. So 5:15 is basically 5 or fifth and a quarter. So that is how we state that. When it is 5 to 6, then speak. Tan, tati is optional here. Ges hapkulul gamek mi iglibi. So ges hapkulul gamek. Again, we're saying 5 to 6. So 5 is gamek, hapkulul less, right? So ges. So ges is 6, ges is sixth. So the hour, sixth, the 6th hour, less 5. So 5 to 6. The last one, take 3 cakes at 20 to 8. That's very specific, by the way. But ichliti kassab gem zai gimon hapkulul lihom. So gimon, the 8th hour, less lihom, less 20. So deduct 20. So 20 to 8. Once you know the structure, how it works, is fairly evident. You have, the structure is, you use the ordinal numbers, so 10th, 4th, 2nd, whatnot. That's what you always put first. When you have to say the time, that is what you will say first. Then you say what you add, deduct, or if it's specifically that hour. So and 5 or less a quarter. So what is it that we add? What is it that we deduct? Or we simply state the hour that it is. So that structure in a way is fairly simple. There's no exceptions to this. That's that structure there. There will be a couple of exercises as well, not too many, where in this week's exercises that you have to write down the time. So I'd say use this slide as your guide and you can't really go wrong. So we covered a lot tonight, perhaps a bit too much in this session. Weather expressions, telling the time, bossing folks around, some light revision even of earlier foundations. They're all small pieces that will make your, Neo-Khuzdul feel more natural, more instinctive over time. So yeah, have a great week, guys, and I look forward to seeing you in the next class. And if there's questions, by all means, you have the Discord. Feel free to give me a DM or just start chatting there. Keep your axes sharp and your minds sharper, folks. Shamuk.